Welcome back to Collecting Cars. Now today we're talking all things Porsche 911, specifically 996 and 997 generations. And these cars have been particularly popular on Collecting Cars. We've sold a load of Porsche 911s, 996 and 997s. So we thought it's about time we come down to meet Mikey at Autofarm and find out what you should be considering when buying one. Hey. Mikey. Good to meet you. Thanks for having us here at Autofarm today. Now, you very kindly offered to talk to us and talk us through two of the first water-cooled Porsches, the 996 and the 997. We'll start with the 996, and quite a departure from the 993, this, isn't it? Everything changed.
Yeah, it is. It's very, it's a fresh platform for Porsche when they did this. You know, they got their evolution of the early car from the 60s all the way through to the 993, and the 993 was their kind of, all that engineering in that kind of development in that final car. And then they went to a completely new platform with the 996. And I think to some degree that's why they got a bit of, you know, when you look on the forums, there's a lot of negativity about the 996, but, you know, it's a fresh, completely fresh car.
Yeah, fresh sheet of paper for them to
but it's the base platform that then formed the evolution for this generation of car into the 997.2 and onwards into the 991.
Yeah, these are now getting incredibly popular, and of course, when they were first released, there was a lot of chat about the design and, of course, the shape of these headlights. Yeah. But now they're looking even better, aren't they? They're looking really cool now, and the design was something that, of course, it was a bit polarising at the time, wasn't it?
Yeah, and I think when they change, you know, the cosmetics of the car in quite a big way. They kept the silhouette the same. If you would stand at the side of the car, you'd still see the 911. But this new design, it dated quite quickly, yes. And then everybody kind of wanted the newer, rounder headlight 997.
997, yeah.
But like you say, this has now started to fall into its own right. It's now appreciating this kind of, this early look for the 996.
That's right. So is this one of the later cars, facelifted model? Because the earlier ones, we obviously had the fried eggs and... This is the early one.
Is it? This is the 98, and then they cleaned up the front, so it's quite a pointy, rounded front on the early ones, and they got a bit squarer on the front on the .2 cars.
Okay. So what are the things? So if there's, you know, the point of this video is talking about those of us that might want to get into either of these cars, and some of the points that you might consider when looking for that car and going in to make a purchase. So let's walk around this car, and then we'll talk about some of the similarities with the 997 as we go. But let's start from the front and then work our way round. What are the things that sort of straight off you might like to sort of think about when looking at the exterior of the car?
I mean, there's generic things with any purchase of a car. You're looking for your history, your maintenance, the servicing, structural integrity to the car. Has it been in an accident? And the paintwork side of things. So let's just assume, for the purpose of this, that you've done all that and it's fine.
Yeah.
If we focus on the kind of inherent things you'd see in a 996, you're looking for, situated behind this bumper on both sides, is two radiators that cool the engine, and then in front of those are two air conditioning condensers.
Yes.
Common area where leaves get trapped through the front bumper.
Yep. Down here,
you can see this one's got some grills fitted to stop that.
Yes,
normally
really
it's completely open, so it's like a big Hoover duct that sucks in, and you'd be surprised what you find in there. There'll be cigarette butts and all sorts off the road that get trapped in. That holds the moisture, all the dirt, and it eventually corrodes the bottom of the.
So it could be a corrosion, or it could just be a stone that's flown in there and burst it. They're actually sort of bigger vents on the C4S as well, aren't they? So that's an even bigger reason to sort of check that. So I suppose even if the air conditioning isn't working and you think it just needs regassing, check these, because it could be that rather than it just need
correct.
regassing.
Yeah. As we're around the front of the car, you can see with this one, because they've got the plastic lenses on the lights. All 996 into 997 suffer from the same thing. With sun bleaching, they start to fade. They'll go like a yellowy, discoloured colour. Again, those can be machined back, polished, and then re-coated with a UV protecting lacquer.
Yeah. And in terms of the headlights, are people now sort of uprating those, because the technology around
massive,
come a long way, isn't it? So
you have to be quite careful, because the old school uprating bulbs, these do have issues. You put high wattage bulbs in, of the old halogen type, they'll melt all the reflectors inside. So it has to be a decent low heat output bulb. Some of the cars had Litronic, so and then when you've got Litronic, they've got the sensors on the suspension to automatically move them as the car's accelerating and braking. But yeah, there's lots you can do in terms of improving that light. And then obvious things is obviously around sort of stone chipping at the nose and things like that. What about when we sort of pop the hood here? There inevitably going to be some things that we need to look at. Yeah. We can pop the hood on this and have a look inside. So once we pop the hood, you can see obviously fairly spacious boot in these.
Yes.
Early cars had this spare wheel. Then when they went to the four-wheel drive, you had the fuel tank moved up.
Yes, so less space.
Less space, the wheel disappeared. You sometimes get a collapsible space saver in the lower part of the boot. So this is quite a spacious one.
Yeah.
Your battery's housed under there. Again, there's nothing really too much untoward that happens under here. Things like your bonnet pistons fail, but then just normal servicey items. You can see again, this is from an authenticity perspective, the data sticker for the car. Yeah. And that will tie up with the service book. So that's quite nice to see. If you see that on a car, you kind of know that it's not had a replacement lid. And are they normally good with seals? Seals need replacing on these often, or is it? Seals are pretty good on these actually. Yeah, don't ever really have too many issues with those. Yeah. There is, if you lift this carpet out, there is areas in here where you can check to see if the car's had accident damage. Right. And that's quite an easy place to go and look. When you're looking at a car, you can just unscrew both of these little screws here. Either side there, yeah. And then you can look inside for paint and metalwork damage. Yeah. So yeah, so if you look in here, this is the area here. This is the main chassis legging. And you can see that that's fine and all the paint and sealer work is original. You know, because the bumper irons are just behind the bumper and they're bolted to this chassis, that's the first place that will mark if it's had a front. Right, round the side, wheels, brakes, suspension. Yeah, so as we start to move further back, obviously there's lots of different options of wheels. Some of the split variants of the wheels will suffer from corrosion, but nothing that you wouldn't get on any other manufacturer of car. Brakes, again, all easily readily available. The calipers, again, are getting to that point where the dust seals are starting to need to be overhauled. They're starting to split, so there's plenty of reputable companies that will overhaul those calipers in terms of repowder coating them and refinishing fitting new dust seals and stuff in. These are really, the screen scuttles go grey on these. Right, yeah. You can buy this, they're relatively cheap, but they colour tarnish, the same with these trims around here. Yeah. That's quite you'd expect that of a car of this age, wouldn't you? Yeah. For having to do a little bit of cosmetic work around the trim. Those aren't sort of scary things. No. It's just kind of, you'd expect to see a car like this that's been well used and loved, that's gonna happen. Quite an easy fix to get that tarted up if you want to. They suffer from corrosion around the base of the wing here. Yeah. Into the end of the sill. Now this has got the aero kit skirts on it, so you can see where the stones have taken the paint off. If it didn't have the aero kit skirts, it would be corroded on the end of the sill. Is that just sort of just debris collecting in there? Yeah, it's literally just what is flicked up from the tyre. It impacts the paint on those areas. Yeah. So again, this is not detrimental corrosion. It's surface corrosion that's just. It's not pinhole or anything, so that can be sorted, can be repainted. It has to be dealt with from behind as well. And now PPFs are available. You can just PPF that part there, and that stops that happening. That's fantastic, isn't it? Yeah, easy to do. And then is it same up in the arches? You know, just up again, in the arches. More of an age thing than anything else. And this is one of those cars where, you know, when Porsche got this generation, it was fully under trade, fully wheel arch linered with plastic. So where you had in the early cars lots of areas to trap dirt and debris, you don't get it with these cars. Yeah, that's great. Same with any car really, isn't it? It's kind of, as you move down sort of the doors and looking at the panel gaps and things like that, just checking that they're all they're all straight as you'd expect them to be. That is a key thing. We're looking at any car, panel gaps, discoloration between paint panel to panel, and then adjoining trims. So, for example, if this car had had, say, an accident, the likelihood of them stripping it enough to take these trims out, they'd probably mask off of those. So there's sometimes telltales where you can see remnants of
just on
just a bit of remnants of overspray on some of the rubber seals and trims.
Right.
These cars they've got on these doors, it's a wraparound seal that goes all the way around and up to the top here.
Yeah.
And there's a metal foil inside there. So when these are removed, they quite often distort. So if you see distortion in those, it normally tells you that they've been off to have paintwork.
Right. And is that the same on this as it is on the 997?
On the 997, yeah. If you open the doors, you'll see the door striker plate.
Yeah.
You can just see there's corrosion creeping from behind the door striker. A very common area on these cars.
Just a little bit there and there, isn't it?
As you come round to the back, wheel arches. So on these, I mean, most Porsche don't normally suffer from it, but most cars have rear arch issues by the way that the inner arches
just the shape collect things. Yeah.
So
is there actually there's that sort of ridge there, isn't there? So that's going to collect dirt, isn't it?
That collects dirt. One of the things with my own cars, I'm always jet washing this area. So this car actually doesn't have that issue.
No.
No. But some do. So it's just another area to keep a close eye on. There is a hidden area that we can't see right now, but there's this plastic wheel arch is hiding it. Debris gets caught behind there and collects in a large pool under here, and it will rot the inner wing out.
Yeah.
So that's something which is a bit of a hidden naughty, so you can't always see it when you're looking at the car. So again, if you're buying something and you've got the option to have it inspected there or someone to inspect it, that's a go-to place just to have a look, because that's a more expensive fix.
How do they get to it?
So this plastic liner, it's not a full, where on the front it's a full wheel arch liner.
Yeah.
This wheel arch liner finishes here.
Partially,
so you can just take that partial liner out
and have a look.
And get behind it.
Yeah.
So you've got, in this generation, the 3.4, then they went to the 3.6, and there's mixed views on which ones people prefer. Some people prefer the 3.4 because it's a bit more of a revvy engine, so you have to work it a bit harder at the higher end of the RPM. But it's personal choice.
Yeah. Which one is this?
So this is the 3.4.
3.4, yeah.
And there are now, with the issues that they have had inside the engines with the bore scoring and with the IMS bearings, you can increase those capacities. So you can go from like 3.4 to 3.7, and you can go from 3.6 to 3.9. So there's plenty of choices for playing if you want to play with it, but straight out of the box as standard there. They are good fun.
Very good. Let's talk about some of those well-documented issues, because it's quite interesting. We before we switched the camera on, we were just sort of touching on those. And how many issues do you see around bore scoring or IMS generally?
It's massively tailed off now.
Yeah.
There was a point where every car that came in had that issue.
Yeah.
There's some cars. This car hasn't ever had a bore scoring issue.
Yeah.
It's done 138,000 miles. It's been driven very well. It's been used as well. We've had cars as low as 5,000 miles have bore scoring and IMS failures.
Wow. Yeah.
So,
but I suppose that let's go back 10 years. Then these are probably very, very common issues. But since then, really good aftermarket parts to resolve certainly the IMS bearing, and then by now most people will have had those attended to.
Yeah.
So actually, whilst yes, it was an issue a while ago, not something to worry. Get it checked, but then
exactly.
have it done. Simple as that.
And you're right. They've gone to that point now where most cars have, if they've got the problem lurking, it's surfaced and it's been fixed.
Yeah.
So there's the issues that would be out there would likely have been attended to.
Yeah.
There are various options for, if you look at IMS bearing, there's lots of different kits that are fitted, and it depends which specialist you talk to which ones they prefer to fit and like.
So if it hasn't been done, it's just there's no real point in sort of beating around the bush. You just need to get crack on and factor that into the cost.
Yes, definitely.
Of purchasing the car and get on and change it.
Yeah. And one of the easiest telltales before you buy a car, do a bore scope check. So they'll pull the spark plugs out put a little camera inside the bore and they can see inside to see if there's any scoring. That's your first easy telltale before you purchase a car. The second thing is inside the oil filter, these are not like the older cars where it's a sealed filter, it's a canister, so you can unscrew a plastic cup, remove the filter, and you can actually inspect the filter, and you can look in the bottom of the canister to see any signs of small metal particles, or almost like a glisten in the oil, where you'll see it almost looks like copper slip in the oil, like gold dust. They're your early warning signs. So I always say to people, just don't let the oil changes go for too long. Keep on top of it.
What are we talking about? And I suppose it depends on how much you use in the car.
Depends how much you use in the car. I would say, I mean, I'm pretty OCD. We'd like to do it every 5,000. And sometimes I'll just want to do a quick spin off of the filter, have a look, and go, yeah, I'm happy with that, and I'll put it back on. Put a new filter in it and send it on its way. So keep an eye on that. If you're looking at doing something like an IMS bearing, that is situated between the engine and the gearbox. So it is depending on the model of the car, it's an engine out or a gearbox out job. So you would try and, make it efficient while you're there, that if the car's at 80-odd thousand and it needs a clutch or a dual mass flywheel,
that's the time to do
you would do them together, because the labour cost is almost nothing. So
that makes total sense.
And I would say these are the other things to look for. If the car's had a clutch and flywheel, you would like to have seen that in there, that it's had those done, and the IMS bearing.
That'd be the time to do it. Perhaps now's a good time then. Should we get the car up and then just have a look at a couple of things that you can point out if you were to look at the underside of the car?
If we park the IMS bearing for now, in terms of ancillaries, you're still doing your routine water pumps. Water pumps are an issue. Aftermarket ones, be very wary with them. You can fit a new one and they will leak through the impeller shaft. So a lot of the parts now, to be brutally honest, stick with Porsche. Because there is a lot of aftermarket stuff out there for a fraction of the cost. But the labour in going in to do the water pump and back out again and then going in another 12 months later.
Buy cheap, buy twice. It's the age-old thing, isn't it?
So water pump, drive belts and pulleys for your auxiliary is easily available through the back of the car, so it's quite an easy thing to do. Exhaust, most of them, these you can see by the shape of the silencer, these are a remade silencer.
Are they normally the clamshells on?
They're preformed to pressed shells folded together, and they rot out along the seams. So that's something, it's an easy telltale to look at. You can see if it's rotten on the seam. Sometimes people cut the seam and weld it, so as like a temporary repair. Catalytic converters, which are situated in here. If the car's had any running issues, they do occasionally fail on the air mass meter, which will cause the car to slightly overfuel, and it will start to eat the cats. So you should be able to stand at the back of the car with it running and not smell any of that old kind of classic car CO smell. So as long as you've got a good, unless it's been decatted, obviously.
And telltale signs on the startup then, any kind of blue smoke or anything?
They should start up fairly clean. You may get the odd little sign. I mean, the telltale for, especially more so for 3.6s, you get that into 997s as well, is discoloration in the tailpipes. So if you've got more so with the left tailpipe, if you've got the left tailpipe is darker than the right, that's an early warning sign that it's started to have a bore scoring issue.
And that's just a sort of dark collection at the bottom there, is that?
Yes, so you'll see it's hard with these because there's no real edge on the tailpipe. If you look at the 997, they're inwardly rolled. So there's more to look at. And the reason I say left is because it's the right side of the engine. So they have gases comes to the back of the car and it crosses over and exits each side. So the first cylinder normally to fail on any 996 or 997 is cylinder number 6, which is this one at the back.
Yes, that's interesting, isn't it? It's just it sort of crosses over and comes out here.
And
so right side of the engine.
Engine. There's lots of theories to why they score on that bore, down to coolant running, different temperature stats. It is the last point of the cooling system. The water is at its warmest at that point.
Right. So it's always number 6 that goes.
It's always number 6 that would go first. And sometimes you'll see like 6 and 5.
Yeah.
But as it's starting to score, your piston rings are starting to, if the bore's scored, the rings aren't sealing, oil is getting passed, and you get that initial puff on startup, so you would see it out the left and not the right.
Right.
And that's the discoloration, is the burning of oil. Every car tends to have a lower control arm or an anti-roll bar issue.
Yeah.
These suffer from, they call them coffin arms because they're like a coffin arm shape.
Yes.
So you've got the coffin arm, and then you've got your tuning fork here.
Yeah.
And this is the bush that we would look at here that would start to delaminate.
Yeah.
And then there's a spherical bush in this one. And these are the same design front to rear.
Is that quite a common problem that you see, and something that's just an age thing rather than anything else?
I would say most cars, unless it's super low mileage and a collector car, they would have had these done already.
At some
and
point.
you would probably be looking to do, depending on the mileage of the car.
Yeah.
I know this had it done before, and these have been done already. We've done them again.
Yeah.
And obviously the car's being well used, so it will need them again.
Is it a big job to have that done?
It's not a massive job. It's a bigger issue when the bolts that go through the rubber bush can seize in place.
Right.
So they're not, they don't undo, especially when they're in this aluminium subframe. You don't obviously want to break the subframe.
No.
So it ends up being a cutting off of the bolt. You will replace the bolts, but it's just a bit more labour intensive that way. So
a bit more work.
Like I say, if the car's being serviced and looked after and it's had preventative, you shouldn't have the bolt shearing. Okay, so one other area on these is the brake line that runs front to rear.
Right.
Not all cars, but some of them have it towards the back of the car. There's a couple of areas where they go through little clips that hold into the chassis and they just corrode away. And we've had a few cars that have actually had the brake line fail.
Oh, wow.
So erupt. So again, that's another key thing to be careful of.
Definitely worth checking. Yeah.
And these are the sort of jobs that, if, for example, you were taking the engine and gearbox out to do your IMS bearing or your clutch, you'd go and look at that brake pipe because you've already got most of the components out the way to change it.
And is that something that you would do as a matter of course if someone's bringing it in for the service?
Yeah. If somebody was saying to me, oh, I want to do the dual mass flywheel in the clutch, you would bank on doing that while you're in there, and if it means it's a couple of months to save to do it, you want to try and do as much of those like tick list things on the car while you're in that area.
Yeah.
Again, things like shock absorbers, springs and top mounts, you'd be doing all those as one item, and likelihood would be that the car would have had those changed. If you're up to sort of 80-odd thousand miles on a car, you'd want to be looking to see those already done. Again, there is a range of components available, and if you were looking at any of that, I would just advise to stay away from anything too stiff, because the mindset is that the car it's old, let's freshen it up. It feels soft now, so they'll go for a stiffer damper and a stiffer spring, where actually, if you just replace it for brand new, that will firm the ride up. But it's not a circuit. If you're not using it on the circuit, you don't want to put that kind of stuff on.
No, it's not necessary. Let's face it, most of us aren't driving that hard on the main road.
But believe it or not, it's probably one of the most common things we see.
Yeah.
People will have the suspension replaced, and most of the time you'll be taking replacement suspension off because it's too firm.
So there's not really a huge amount of kind of the list of things that you need to look out for in addition to those we've already talked about on this. So it's quite short, isn't it? It's quite a short list of things.
The difference with this car is there's a bigger influx of control units in this vehicle to this vehicle.
Right.
So that's where you really, your diagnostic checking is really important for making sure that, like when you open the door, there's a micro switch that triggers a window to drop.
Right.
So just making sure that the door lock modules are okay, the PWIS system will store any of those weird faults in there. So that's quite a key thing when you get to this generation of car.
Diagnostics can really tell you
Huge. It's
amounts.
huge. And some of the faults, you know, the car's instrument system will only flag major faults.
Right.
Fault with the ABS, fault with the traction control, fault with the engine. More superficial, like heating control faults, will be a more so fault that you would experience as opposed to it flagging a problem.
Right.
So that's where I would say your diagnostic health check, where it would scan every single control unit, is crucial.
Yeah. Okay. It's just a bit more of a sophisticated,
More a sophisticated
refined
system.
car, isn't
yes.
it?
Yeah. And they have in the front, again, the battery's housed just under the bonnet here, same as it is in the 996, but they have a split cable, and it's where the cable joins that these suffer. And you will get like a slow to crank sometimes, so it sounds like the battery's flat, but you've probably charged it and you're kind of confused why it's slow to turn over. So that's a common area. Same kind of things on these as you get corrosion with the wheel bolts and the collars on the wheel bolts. You know, if the car's been serviced and they're doing brake fluid changes with the wheels on, which is not something that I would ever recommend. You'll see cars that have only the outside nipple undone on the brake caliper, but not the inner nipple.
Right.
So this generation of car, we see lots of problems where you go to do a brake fluid change, the outer nipple will undo, but the inner nipple will shear off, or it won't come undone.
Yeah.
And again, just with your washing, avoid acid wheel. Any acidic product on the wheels, that accelerates all the corrosion on the suspension. It takes all of the plating finishes off of wheel nuts, brake caliper nipples.
Yeah. What do you guys use on the wheels?
We just use a pH neutral. You know, if it's a nice car, we don't even use a wheel cleaner. We just use normal body wash on those wheels, because if you keep on top of them, they're fine.
Yeah.
And just a light pressure wash off. It doesn't need doing all the time. It's just to get rid of that extra dirt and debris.
Does it make a big difference if you have them ceramic coated, or?
Yeah, we do a lot. If we do any paint work, I'd ceramic coat the car.
Yeah.
If it was a weekend car and you enjoyed cleaning, then I'd probably avoid the ceramic coating, because it's a labour of love thing. But in terms of looking after it, ceramic coating, wheels, bodywork, glass, it makes it easy to clean, and it stops fallout on the car.
Yeah.
Cars across both platforms, when they had the electronic lid release, as opposed to the physical cable, if the battery goes flat, you can stick the key into the door to unlock the door, but then obviously you've got no electronic release to release the bonnet. There is a manual release on the bonnet, but you have to take the wheel arch liner out, and you need the wheel off to do so. So it's always a good thing to keep your locking wheel nut key in the glove box.
Oh yeah, otherwise you can't get the wheel off.
Get it off. Now there is on the electronic cars, there is a tab that you pull out of the fuse board, and you can put a jump pack onto those 2 points, and it will power up part of the system for you to unlock the lid.
Yeah.
But if you don't have that at home, then it's
or the wheel nut in your glove box.
Yeah.
You're going to have to tow the car, get the car to a garage, aren't you, to get the wheel off? Ah, top tip there. Very good. Well, let's have a look on the inside, because really this is where, other than the some of the cosmetic things on the outside, this is where kind of a lot of the change you'll notice, certainly as a driver anyway. So, I mean, first up in here, you notice all this leather dash and around all the doors. It feels a much more sort of luxurious cabin, doesn't it?
Yes, it is. It's you know, they moved the clocks back out to give you more of that kind of 5 o'clock feel.
Yeah.
The kind of seating position, the way the seats are formed, you sit into the seat.
Yeah.
The information.
This has got the sports seats on it. So
this has got the sports,
standard sort of seats. They're very nice, aren't they?
Very nice. And again, it's got a lot of leather trim in the car.
Yeah.
So it's a nicer place to be. So like the clusters, you can see, you know, there's a little bit more digital in there. There's a lot of more information in the information display. Yeah. And they've spread them out so that you've got that kind of more classic 911 feel.
One of the things I always notice when I get into a 997, and sort of a bit of a bugbear, is just on the steering wheel that there's almost like a vein going through the middle.
Yes.
What is that, and why didn't they rectify that?
What it is that round disc in the middle is the airbag module that slots in.
Yeah.
And even though that's got a badge and leather on it, it's designed in, and when the airbag goes off, it has to open.
Has to split.
And that is the brake line for the airbag. So it wouldn't have been there originally.
Yeah.
But over time, it's just age.
It just comes through. And is that a case if that's the sort of thing that bothers you? Can you just replace that cap, or is it? They do.
Yeah, I mean it's replace. You'd have to buy the replacement airbag for
really?
that.
Yeah.
So and obviously because of the function of that item there being a safety item,
Yeah.
it's something you can't just glaze over it and
No.
trim it. The other thing that's interesting that's starting to come to light now is switching of steering wheels on these cars, and it goes across any car that's had an airbag fitted. There's new legislation come in to say that if a car had an airbag fitted, it needs to have that airbag in place for the MOT, unless it is a race car.
Right.
So a lot of people are switching steering wheels out to put like the original classic Momo steering wheel on.
Yeah.
So that's now becoming a bit of an MOT issue.
Yeah.
just
So
have to
hold
watch
on
that.
to it if you take it
Do
off.
not throw that away.
Yeah.
Can you see here? So this is the rubber coating on the switches
Right.
that wear. Now
Yeah.
you can buy replacement panels. There are companies that actually supply you new buttons or will refinish those and rescreen print the writing on.
The writing on them. Yeah.
They both have that old school 911 feel with the weight right over the back of the car. But what is very, I find very different between this 996 to the 997 is the fact that it's a more insulated cabin. There's more electronics in play. You could do more miles easier in the 997.
Yeah.
So if you were going to use it as a daily, the 997 with a decent phone system in would tick all the boxes.
Yeah.
Equally, it's great for touring. There's, as I say, there's lots of things. If you wanted it more sporty, there's different exhausts for them. And if you've got the one with the PASM options, then you can have the switchable suspension, which gives you the best of
both worlds.
So it's nice and soft for the daily driving, and you can flick the button when your other half's not in the car and go and have some fun.
Perfect. Well, on that note, we might get you to take us out for a quick
Let's go
spin.
for a play. So there's quite a different feeling in this to what you'd get in like the 997, because this has got a cable on the accelerator pedal, where the other ones are what they call fly-by-wire, so it's an electric pedal. Again, difference between the 996 to 997 and the early ones like this, you've got quite a large steering wheel. You know, the difference between 996 into 997, you get more creature comforts in the 997. These early 996s inside, it's a more, I would say, more of a raw experience. It's quite basic in the sense of there's very simple switches for operating heating systems and stuff, and there's not a lot. This doesn't have switchable suspension or anything like that. It's just as it comes out of the box as it is. The nice thing with these cars is the throttle pedal was still hinged from the floor, which is how the early 911s were. The clutch and brake are hinged from the behind the dashboard, the top, so they're hinged downwards, which is not how the early 911s were. But you still gives you that kind of feeling. You can really feel it at that sort of 4,000 RPM point is where the car really comes to life. And that's what I love with the 3.4 996 is that they need that kind of rev out just to really get them to get up and go. Handling wise, as long as it's got a sensible geometry set up and there's no play in any of the bushes, you get this really nice sort of planted feeling. As you squeeze the throttle, you feel the back of the car tuck in. As we come over this bridge here, you really feel the back of the car squat in and take grip. And because you've got that extra weight in the back of the car hanging out the back, it plants that over the rear wheels. Just jumping straight from the 996 straight into the 997, you can feel instantly slightly lighter clutch pedal, more responsive throttle pedal. You can feel that kind of fly-by-wire, but quite sensitive. So again, like I kind of said, there's a few more creature comforts in the 997. Especially with this particular model that's got the sport seats, you're kind of sat more into the seat than on top of the seat. But it is a similar experience. You don't have electric power steering, you've still got the hydraulic power steering on the car. It's quite a connected feel. You do still feel part of the mechanical process in terms of the way the clutch pedal feels and changing gear. bigger tyre contact area on the 997s on the rear, so you can really feel that kind of drive out grip through the corners that you get in these to the 996s. Well, they are just such an easy car to drive.
So now you know what to look out for when you're choosing between a 996 and 997, but what would you go for? Would it be this car or the 997? I'm still torn between the two. I love the look of the 996. I think it's really come into its own, but is the 997 a more complete package? Let us know what you think in the comments section below, or better still, head over to collectingcars.com and check out our current listings. Thanks for watching and see you soon.